All right, so we're playing a KickWax kit building game today. First, I need to introduce our contestants. I'm Zach. Seated on either side of me are two of my favorite waxers. These guys were junior skiers together in this area a long time ago, who I used to coach when I was an even younger guy than I am now. On my right is Brayton Osgood, now the head coach for men at Dartmouth College, and a very good kickwaxer, although he does tend to get beat by Jason Lemieux pretty often, I think. Seems that way to me. On my left is Nick Brown, who I have to say is considered by most to be one of the, probably the preeminent kickwaxer in the country right now. Although some other coaches think that Peppa just happens to be a really good classic coach. I happen to know that the Craftsbury skiers have Nick Magic on their skis. Nick was one of the first employees I had when I started grinding skis. And Nick, where's that mix wax, Nick?
Oh,
were you going to use that? This is a Nick creation. This wax right here is something with an alarming amount of moly disulfide in it that Nick made in the shop. This is now over 10 years ago.
Over 10 years
12
ago.
years ago or something. And it made a heck of a mess. I don't even remember, but
It worked once.
yeah, once. Nick and I have worked together for a long time. I've known both these guys for a long time, and they're both really good waxers who work professionally, wax skis day in and day out. Now here's our challenge. We need to build a kick kit, and this is specifically for a customer who has asked for a really high level, good kick kit to start out with. We're going to focus on hard wax or dry wax, and we have a budget, 150 bucks. We're going to start a little bit logically with base wax. I'm assuming, because both of these guys are sort of pupils of mine over time, that they are intelligent enough to understand and realize that binder and base wax are often referred to as being different, but they're the same thing. And that the reason we use binders more often than just holding wax to the ski is to provide some sort of base for the kick wax. And if you do good work with your base wax, you're broadening the target for your kick wax and making it much easier to make really good skis. Would you guys agree with that statement?
Yeah.
You'd better.
Well, in that case, maybe I'll argue it for a long time, but it's easier to agree.
Okay, so we're going to agree. I'm going to pull mine out. You guys can pull yours out. I'd be surprised if they're different. I have Vouty Super Base.
I have Vouty Super Base. That's what mine says too.
Vouty Super Base.
Base
Almost universally accepted as one of the best, as the best, most universal base wax out there. But I'm gonna modify this in time, because very often we need to mix down the Vouty Super Base in order to take some of the tooth out of it. It's a pretty sharp kicking wax, and I like to mix it with some other stuff to sort of soften the effect a little bit.
But it mixes well.
But it mixes well. It mixes well, and you're always going to put it on with an iron. Application trick: store it on the ground. It's really hard to work with when it's warm, because it gets super sticky. Some people like to dab it onto an iron to warm it up and put it on thin, but if you keep it kind of on the bench top and then try to smear it onto a cold ski, you get massive globs, and it takes a ton of iron work to get rid of it.
I actually like to have the wax cold and heat the ski lightly before I just crayon it on, and it goes on very easily.
Then you can really control the thickness really well. You get a thin layer the first time, and you can even take it and like rub back over the iron application, and you'll build the thickness really incrementally, so you can control that process really well. But when we're on the right base wax, this is one opportunity where I feel really clear that you have a chance to improve both the kick and the speed of the wax job.
What's next?
Cold kick wax. I got Rody Green.
Rody Green. I got 2.
2.
Yep. I got Rody -3 to -10 and start Oslo Green.
Okay. Well, I got Rody Green.
I was gonna say I have this too, but I use it slightly differently.
Well, we'll go through this. I have Rody Green. In fact, I have 2 also. I chose Rody Green because it's fast. It's almost always fast, and it has a pretty sharp kick in quite cold conditions. And there are plenty of times when we end up with something even colder than Rody Green. But one of the things is that when you need something colder than Rody Green, often if you glaze it with an iron, you get your speed out of it anyway. It's really a very versatile wax that way, and it tends to be fast and quite a strong kick for cold conditions. So I went with Rody Green. But since I'm moderating this conversation, I'll say that I also have my T12G mix. I believe both of you might be familiar with. This is next level kick in the cold. If there's a little mixed granular stuff in there, it leaves Rody Green in the dust, and often is both faster and better kick. And I just happen to have one made up. So I put that in my kit. We might point out that Brayton's Start Racing Super is maybe going in the same direction, or
I think, in fact, when Nick and I were not talking about the waxes we were putting in our boxes, we alluded to the fact that this might be a readily available alternative in inventory to that wax. And
I try to keep it in inventory, but this was the last one, and I figured no harm in hiding it from you guys, you know?
Right, so yes, and I like that with the Clister in this, you can start to deal with some of the transformed and really aggressive cold snows that you don't want straight Clister on the ski, and covering the Clister is challenging in those sort of conditions.
And to be clear, the Clister additive in there, in the right conditions, doesn't slow it down. It tends to, in fact, speed it up.
Oh yeah, it freezes.
Although I will say that this is a lot slower than this. Every single. But that's neither here nor there. Maybe suitable as a base, but yeah, anyway. Nick, would you like to talk about your Pro Grip Green? Because that hadn't occurred to me as one of my picks.
I really like this as a cover wax. It works really well in the cold and it stays free. It also has some fluoro content, which some of the cold fluoros I don't actually like as much. But this one I can use to add fluoro layer to some warmer waxes, or I can use it in the extreme cold and it'll stay nice and free.
And so how warm a range of conditions will you use that?
I'll use it covering right up into blue waxes.
Okay.
Maybe just one layer, just to take some of the tooth out of some of the stickier stuff. I often like to go a little stickier with my grip wax and then cover it with something cold.
Yep, interesting.
Do you want me to talk about my -3 to -10?
Oh, yeah, you might as well talk about your -3, -10.
So I mean, I think
your budget.
blowing my budget on the cold waxes, questionable call. I think at least testing this year, had such good luck with it on speed and kick in fresh snow below probably 25 degrees that for a simple wax box and not having to worry, it just made sense.
Can we talk about when you recently used it?
We can.
Okay.
Yeah, we were at Fort Kent for the first Eastern Cups. Temperatures started off at -3 in the morning, and it was windy. Not the most pleasant ski racing, and I think we warmed into the mid-single digits throughout the day. And I tested it against warmer waxes, and it outkicked them, and I tested it against colder waxes, and it outkicked them, and it was faster than everything. So at some point, it seemed like
that's pretty good.
It's a good wax.
To be clear, it's a Rody wax. It's one of their national team waxes, which we consider to be sort of a cold extension of their top line series, which often people get a little confused about and think are like a topping wax or a fluorinated wax is actually a different set of raw materials. Rody Green and a lot of the Rodys, in fact, I believe they still have like beeswax in this stuff. Seriously.
It hasn't changed in a really long time,
and
as far as I can tell.
It's really good, but it doesn't surprise me if Rody's making some stuff out of more modern materials and charging a lot more money for it. But we are talking like a $25 tunnel wax right there. So,
I mean, I think
if it's easy to use.
It's easy to use, and also your cold waxes, wide range, and they go on very easily. It lasts for a long time.
Yeah, it's true, and it is very easy to apply.
The more likely you're going to lose it in a snowstorm with the white tin.
Yeah.
Falls off your bench, which is a problem.
Yeah, and that's sort of part of the built-in marketing of the whole thing.
Advantage for you.
The resale. Yeah, it's good. You guys all ready for the next warmer? So normal winter cold. Yeah. Okay. I have 2.
I have 2.5.
2.5. All right.
I'll start with 2.
I'll just start with 1.
Okay. Rody. -1, -7.
-1, -7.
Huh. Okay.
-1, -7.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the warmer complement to the -3, -10, and I don't know many really good waxers who don't value this really, really highly. This is pretty much in everyone's wax box, right?
Yeah.
I think so. Easy to use. It's fast in a wide range of conditions. You can run it really cold. It stays good as it gets warmer.
Interestingly, Craftsbury Marathon last year was a snowstorm, fresh snow overnight, horrific glaze. Everyone thought it was going to be Clister the day before, and then it snowed onto the old snow. There was a lot of moisture below that was coming up, and people were out there. I saw people on like Toco Red. People were really struggling, and -1, -7 kicked all day long.
It was great.
It's alarming what it can handle even on the warm end of things. It's very surprising at times. So yeah, that was
a great blue level wax.
I think it's the best. Right, I noticed you pulled a Vauti Carrot.
I did pull a Vauti Carrot. I like Carrot, I think, in very similar conditions to this, but maybe slightly fresher snow when you don't need quite a strong kick, and it just tends to run. I've found it as a speed, either a speed layer or on its own, just that little bit of extra freeness, and you're starting to get into the temperature ranges where the speed really does matter.
Yep. I pulled something that looks very similar but acts pretty different. This is the Vauti GF Carrot, the Floraline Carrot, which is formerly K18. And the reason that I pulled this is that Super Basing K18 is an iconic and incredible mix on a very broad range of temperatures in transformed or old snow, or man-made snow involved. Mind-blowing kick and really good speed. The trick is if the moisture comes up and it glazes, it'll start to get slow. This stuff is very viscous. There's not a lot of the GF waxes, I should say, use some fluoro for some multigrade element so that the wax sort of softens as it gets warmer, which is really important to maintain the speed. This stuff doesn't really do that, so it's a good base when it warms up, but if you have it on the surface, you got to be careful. Given how much old snow we deal with, I really like to have this in the box. I don't use it all the time, but I find that it's outstanding when I do. So I put that in. Nick, you're running a lean box so far. I got to say, you've got a lot of confidence in your ability to work with the materials that you've got and use. I think that Pro Grip is interesting because I hadn't really thought of going to the speed cover at those cold temps. But
I feel like it gives me some flexibility and it keeps it simple. If you have a couple different waxes to try, there's less to try, there's fewer questions, and then you can modify some well-known waxes.
It's worth noting, in terms of your success with your team, that you are typically waxing one of the bigger teams on the Super Tour circuit in terms of the number of skis that you're servicing, and generally have really good skis for the whole team. The implication being that you're doing good work with product, not just picking good skis. Now, I think you do a lot of background work to understand the skis very well, but it is interesting as a point of observation for me that when we're discussing kick wax, you tend to always be thinking and talking about keeping things simple enough so that you understand the parameters for adjustment and that you can work quickly and easily to keep things in the game. So
there's a lot of kick waxes. I think it's easy to get distracted and miss what's actually important if you're chasing too many different variables, and so keeping it concise and knowing where you're going, I think, is really helpful to anybody, especially if you're don't have a staff to work with.
So are we square on the blue range?
Well, I think you're going to take us to the violet range next, and based on Nick's noise there in mind, I think we probably have a transitionary waxes we'd want to pull out before we get right into violets.
Okay. Yeah, what would you like to introduce now?
I really like the Rhodey T-Line V0 wax.
Is it V0 or VO? I keep calling it VO.
I don't know.
It's VO.
VO?
I'm just telling you right now. It's
Okay.
VO. Yeah, exactly.
It is a violet colored wax. Often I use it in blue conditions. One of the temperature ranges that it lists is -3 to -5. I think of it as a good place to try in blue conditions. Sometimes it's faster and kickier than other blue waxes. It's a really predictable progression up from the -1, -7.
I agree.
It doesn't get gummy, so I can build a thicker layer if I want it without starting to gum up under the cork.
Those top line waxes are really notable for good bulk properties. That they're they're stable at higher volume.
And some of the violet waxes start to move around a little bit more under the cork.
Yeah.
So that's my transition wax. I think of it as sort of like a violet special.
Yep.
Or extra blue type wax.
Worth noting, Super Tour races in Craftsbury when we had that mass start 30K in a dumping snowstorm with temperatures in the single digits, like 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
2 years ago, I guess.
2 years ago. Everyone was on green waxes. Most people were on green waxes. I had Freeman on that, straight, uncovered. And he won. He skied away from everyone because the kick was next level, and it wasn't icing, and it was fast. We had it thin on a low 902 hard wax ski. And yeah, we're talking single digits Fahrenheit.
Yep.
Amazing.
Definitely use this in incredibly cold temperatures. It falls into the category of things that I can. There's very few days where I won't try that.
Exactly. Yeah, it's almost always in the test.
So I do have that one in there. And I also have another wax in similar range, the Rhody Vice, which I may end up a little light when it comes to the real violets by spending so much time with options as we go from warmer than the -1 to -7. But I really like this as, especially out west when you start to, you have the older snowpack that's refreezing overnight and getting up close to freezing during the day, and you get some weird moisture coming out.
Yeah.
And it stays fast, and it really can add quite a lot of kick.
The place where I like it is when I consider the tracks to be almost skied out. Like, you know, you're on blue wax, and it's just like, you start missing because the tracks are just heavily skied, and you get that kind of creamy, silky glaze. It's not a wet glaze, it's just like a used up glaze. And that Vice is amazing, really good.
It doesn't cost a lot in speed usually too.
No, it tends to be quite good in speed. I mean, that's the thing.
Like you can bump up to violet and you start to get the kick, but it slows down,
Yep.
and that can get you the kick without compromising the speed.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I put it in between these two, because sometimes it's just got that little extra speed.
Interesting. I'm pulling the wild card. This is new. I haven't got a lot of experience with it yet. This is the GF Pink. Now, the Vouty relabeled all their wax. Irritatingly, they have found it impossible to stick with the same names or labels for like 2 years in a row. So they have this GF Pink now, which is an addition to what used to be the K line. This GF Pink did not previously exist, and it's they're labeling it as a 0 to -5. They used to have a floral pink that was +1/2 to -1/2. The narrowest range ever advertised. And I'll tell you something, they were right. Don't try to use it outside the range. This is different. I skied on this the other day up at Dusty Ridge when Amy was on Rhody Violet, because it felt like the wax, like the grains were just starting to dull enough that you needed something more. This was so much faster than the Rhody Violet. I believe the range, it's got a tackiness. Now, a lot of what we're using, like these top line waxes, are dry waxes, what I would consider very dry waxes. Not exactly chalky, but not tacky. This is a tacky wax, and I feel like a lot of times we can get sort of a next level kick. So even though I don't know this as well as I would like to be able to recommend it, I can tell you I will be putting this on skis very frequently this year, and I think it's going to be a player. I think it's going to be a favorite, because my early feelings on it are just outstanding. Also, good luck with it in Period 1 World Cups. We got it on snow, starting in Cusimo, and got some good feeling and testing on it. So
nice.
I think it's I'm excited about that. That's why I pulled it.
I'm just gonna go up the Rhody T-line to VPS. It's a predictable wax. Works for me a lot like Rhody Violet. It doesn't usually have much in the way of liability. If it works, it's great. If it doesn't work, it's just not awesome. It's not a huge problem. Yeah. It covers really well with one of these colder waxes, or even down to a really cold wax. It's easy to cover, so it's easy to modify. You can bury one layer under 3 of something else.
Yeah. Well, this is where I felt my budgetary constraints, and I jumped straight to VXPS, which it hurts a little bit to leave VPS out of the mix.
So let's just be clear about this. We're gonna line this up. If we've got VO on the cold end, VPS in the middle, VXPS here. So the way I like to think of it is that the VPS is Rhody's new updated version of their Rhody Zero, their straight violet, which is like my favorite violet wax of all time. I actually have one in here just in case I still had the money to cover it. I'll just put it out there for maybe you guys will forget. VPS is like Rhodey Zero. VO is like Rhodey Multigrade Violet, except that it's useful.
It's true. I mean,
people love Rhodey Multigrade Violet because it kicks. You're on blue, you don't get kick, you put on Multigrade Violet, oh, hey, it works, I have kick. Just don't compare your speed with anyone because you will be bad. That wax is terrible. I've seen it successfully used, but more often than not, I think it's slow. This is not slow. This is fast.
Yeah, that's good.
VXPS is like Violet Extra, which I very seldom used, but actually is quite good, and it's definitely toothier than the VPS.
Yeah, well, so it's a big step.
Yeah.
And I mean, the reason I pulled it out was because, as you guys have alluded to before, these cover well and mix well, and playing carefully with VXPS without a VPS available, I feel like is something you can have a chance of doing, and it certainly opens up more ranges on the warmer end, which I, left myself. You're gonna make sacrifices when you're on a $150 budget, no matter what you do. So that was my choice.
Warmer?
What do we have next?
What do we got? Hey! I have M3R. It's another mix. This is another old one. This is one that Nick and I actually first made in the same mixing session that resulted in that molly bisulfide mix.
Yeah.
Only this one had legs. This one lasted.
So that one works pretty well.
That one works really well. This wax I have used with really good success, both internationally and domestically, and continue to be surprised. Basically, the bottom line is it's got some blister in it. You got to test it for icing liability, but it tends to be really fast and tends to have next level kick in that range, and it can reach down with granular snow or some sugary stuff right down into the low 20s, and it can go above freezing in fresh crystals. We've had super good luck with it. I'm not calling it a panacea. It doesn't cover everything in the range. Sometimes it's really slick, but it can be really, really good. And so I put it in there. And you guys don't have it because there's only one.
I picked sort of wild card wax, this Star Racing Red. I've had some decent luck with this in this range. It can be fast. It can get kick when things start to get glazy and wax is either icing or just not kicking, and it's just frustrating. And I've had some really good luck with this, especially if you're covering something else. It's a little bit of a wild card wax, but it's gotten me out of a lot of trouble in the last couple of years. I find I'm using it more and more frequently.
Question.
Yeah.
High altitude or low altitude? Do you see a correlation?
I've used it more at elevation in the mountains. There's that sometimes interesting dry snowpack that's actually developing some surface water.
Yeah.
It's something I actually really appreciate. The carrot handles pretty well in its range
yes.
at elevation.
Yep.
And this does the same sort of thing in new snow.
Yeah. When we were living in Colorado, those two were like money.
Yeah.
Great waxes. This could carry you right up into a glaze. There was a Super Tour race or something in Aspen once where,
Yeah. Use that in Aspen all the time.
Unbelievable that it could kick. And it was just bomber kick right up the glaziest hill right by the high school. And this, likewise, North Boulder Park on a day when nothing should kick. This was just great, fast.
Yep.
Yeah, anyway.
So, it's a good wild card wax. It's not one of the main waxes that I test all the time, but it's nice to have when things are getting frustrating and I'm at the warm end.
To put it into context, this is way stronger kick than this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I would say, eastern or low elevation or more European style, low altitude conditions, I would go for that. But high altitude or overall drier snowpack, this moistening, that's very interesting.
This is, I sort of feel like it's probably a little bit more just an alternative wax at this level.
Yeah. Warmer?
What do we have next?
What do we got? Hey! I have M3R. It's another mix. This is another old one. This is one that Nick and I actually first made in the same mixing session that resulted in in that molybdenum sulfide mix.
Yeah.
Only this one had legs. This one lasted.
So that one works pretty well.
That one works really well. This wax I have used with really good success, both internationally and domestically, and continue to be surprised. Basically, the bottom line is it's got some blister in it. You got to test it for icing liability, but it tends to be really fast and tends to have next level kick in that range. And it can reach down with granular snow or some sugary stuff right down into the low 20s, and it can go above freezing in fresh crystals. We've had super good luck with it. I'm not calling it a panacea. It doesn't cover everything in the range. Sometimes it's really slick, but it can be really, really good. And so I put it in there. And you guys don't have it. Because there's only one.
I picked sort of wild card wax, this Star Racing Red. I've had some decent luck with this in this range. It can be fast. It can get kick when things start to get glazy and wax is either icing or just not kicking, and it's just frustrating. And I've had some really good luck with this, especially if you're covering something else. It's a little bit of a wild card wax, but it's gotten me out of a lot of trouble in the last couple of years. I find I'm using it more and more frequently.
Question.
Yeah.
High altitude or low altitude? Do you see a correlation?
I've used it more at elevation in the mountains. There's that sometimes interesting dry snowpack that's actually developing some surface water. Yeah. It's something I actually really appreciate. The carrot handles pretty well in its range.
Yes.
At elevation.
Yep.
And this does the same sort of thing in new snow.
Yeah. When we were living in Colorado, those two were like money.
Yeah.
Great waxes. This could carry you right up into a glaze. There was a Super Tour race or something in Aspen once where,
Yeah. Use that in Aspen all the time.
Unbelievable that it could kick, and it was just bomber kick right up the glaziest hill right by the high school. And this, likewise, North Boulder Park on a day when nothing should kick. This was just great, fast.
Yep.
Yeah. Anyway.
So it's a good wild card wax. It's not one of the main waxes that I test all the time, but it's nice to have when things are getting frustrating and I'm at the warm end.
To put it into context, this is way stronger kick than this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I would say, eastern or low elevation or more European style, low altitude conditions, I would go for that. But high altitude or overall drier snowpack that's moistening, that's very interesting.
This is, I sort of feel like it's probably a little bit more just an alternative wax at this level.
Yeah. Okay, who wins?
How do we judge?
Maybe we need to
You had a bunch of stuff that we didn't even know you had in inventory.
That's how I roll.
Okay.
I mean, you think I'm inviting you to my shop without claiming some sort of advantage?
No.
Okay.
I didn't.
Good. No, it's only these mixed waxes, and they're available at times. Now,
and you do sell them occasionally, right?
I do.
When I'm in inventory.
Yeah, they're on the web store, and I sometimes tick the inventory up to like 3 when I make a batch.
Okay.
But I only make them. So this M3R, I had a big tub mixed of the base that I didn't have the additive in, which I got to add tin by tin, and so I mixed some tins up because Dave Hosmer wanted some after the Craftsberry demo where we were running this. It was a greasy, tough to kick day, and what was interesting is this stuff was picking up a little ice on its own, but I had some Vauti HFC 21, the original 21 liquid, which the formula's changed. It's a almost useless glide wax for us. So I just covered with it.
Yep.
And it was good. It made fantastic skis. I was like, oh, I'll try that again. So yeah, I had a request for the M3R, so I mixed some up. And the T12G, ever since that Craftsberry Marathon that was part of the Masters Nationals, like 3 years ago or something.
Yeah.
Where Pat O'Brien went on that, his first year coaching.
Yeah.
He won by a mile after. What did he have to do? He broke someone's pole. He was in the lead with another guy. Broke the guy's pole. Felt bad. Stopped at the athlete house.
He gave the other guy's pole.
Yeah, gave the guy his pole. Ran into Eleanor's, got a pole, caught back up, traded poles back, and then won. but that was on this. But so Bob Gray, Trina Hosmer, they were on this. Betsy Youngman was on this. We had a lot of victories that day in age groups on that stuff. That was good. We've been using that a lot.
I've had some good results with it too.
You know, in fact, I mixed this up and I gave you some and I kept it and I worked with it a little bit and it was like, I think I was trying to run it too warm. And you were like, that's really good when it's cold. And I was like, ding, I should try it when it's colder. I didn't think it was going to run that cold.
And I think one of the things
I have to admit that when I sell them online, I sell them for a lot more money than my budget would allow for.
I think I came in under budget actually.
Really? Should we tally it up?
And I definitely have the fewest. Do I have the fewest? I went on the fewest number of cans.
Let's go
without the attic wax.
Without the attic
You
wax.
might have.
Yeah. So I have 8.
Well, I have 7.
No, 7.
Yeah.
But that removes the without the attic wax and without the Rhody Violet, which I'm okay with, kind of.
Would you go out without Rhody Violet to a race?
No, I wouldn't. Of course I would.
Okay.
But so I'm leaning heavily on the pink.
Okay.
I just don't.
I haven't tried it yet.
We'll see. You're gonna have to try it.
I'm gonna try it for sure.
So basically we've got for estimation purposes we've got $12 waxes and we've got like $25 waxes. Call that $100 right there, roughly. I'll just make a discount.
Good.
Make it happen.
I think this is. 125 and another 25 keeps me under.
Yeah.
And I think this is maybe a little less.
I think that's like $18.
$18,
yeah.
so it's not that expensive compared to
Yeah.
the other high end.
So I think $12 over, but I don't know if this one is a little cheaper or not.
We can nudge it down a
So
little bit.
yeah, well I spent my $150 and then realized that I didn't have a super base and it was not even any point in showing up at the table with that, so I just threw it in.
Okay. Good. All right.
Great.
There we go.
Good
Thank you guys. That was fun. I'll have to do it again sometime. Maybe with Clister. Excellent.